Okay, folks, we're headed into our last game. Got about 5 minutes into the last round. Pairings are not up yet, though I'm sure I'll put it on screen if I can figure out who I'm playing. Hopefully, I'll be playing white. There are a few different possibilities. If I play somebody even close to my own rating, even if I lose, I think I will have gained a fair amount of rating this tournament. Rating doesn't really matter, but it's a fun side game to look at, independent of what's going on. I mean, I'm trying to play sharply every game, but it is fun to see the number go up sometimes. If I end up playing one of the lower rated players, like rated 700 or 900 or something, that I have to draw to gain some rating. But if I win that last game, sort of independent of who it is that I'm playing, I should actually gain a fair amount, like maybe 70 or 80 rating points. Like the difference between going, 1 out of 4 or 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4 is a huge swing in rating for me, even despite the fact that I'm not provisional anymore. So that's exciting. It looks like tournament pairings are going to be posted relatively soon, and I do need to go inside and use the restroom. So we'll see how this last one goes. Hopefully I get a fun game. It'd be really nice to get a Smith Mora, just because that's like really exciting, interesting positions. But we'll see how it goes. And then after this, I've got to drive straight to the airport to go pick up Mel, which should be good. I'm looking forward to seeing her. All right, folks. I'll see you guys after the round.
All right, folks, I've got a really exciting one for you here. So I'm playing Chayan Machanda. I have white. It is the last round. I just lost to Joshua Guerra in the third round. So it's the fourth round, last round of the day. And if I can pull off a draw or a win, then I'm going to gain a ton of rating points. And I think if I lose, I might actually gain a few rating points, but it's not entirely clear. I might lose a few. So a draw or a win gains us a lot here. So we're an e4 player. We play e4, and our opponent plays e5. We play f4. E takes f4, our opponent accepts, and we play knight f3, and we see something that I have yet to see over the board here, which is bishop e7. And this is what's called the Cunningham defense, and the general idea is, let's say I do nothing. My opponent wants to play a check here, and if I takes, and then I can't block, and I've got to like step up here, and this is, -6 or something. It's awful. It's terrible. It's very bad. So that's the general idea. And even if so I have to do something that accounts for the fact that this check is going to come, and something that I haven't had the chance to display yet in the King's Gambit, but which is often the case, is that if you can just nestle your king on f1, it's okay. You're going to end up pushing these pawns a lot of the time regardless, so this rook is going to be able to get into the game. So the two moves that the computer suggests the most are either bishop e2, which I did not play because that's not particularly enterprising, or bishop c4. You basically just say, yeah, okay, come check me. I won't be able to castle. It literally does not matter. Another move that the computer likes here is queen e2. And the idea there is if check, you can play takes, and then here, queen takes f2, king takes f2, and then something like, what is it? I think the computer here wants f5, and then I'm supposed to play something like bishop c4. But the gist here is that even if we see takes, we play knight here, it's going to be hard for our opponent to defend this pawn. So the result is that, like, we have more pieces developed than our opponent. We're down a pawn, but we're down 2 pawns right now, but we're not going to be down. So the computer thinks this is relatively equal. So, but queen e2 takes a lot of the material off the board, and I want to play fighting chess. So I play bishop c4. Our opponent checks, and one thing that you can do is you can play takes and then move your king, but then your opponent is defending this pawn. So it's actually better when this check happens not to take and just play king f1 directly. And I played that almost immediately. I knew that this was going to be an idea, and the time is going to be important in this game. So we both started with 45 minutes, and this is the first time that my opponent really thought, and my opponent thought for 4 minutes because they're like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here. The computer just wants my opponent to move their bishop back to e7. My opponent plays d6, which kind of puts us in a sort of Fischer defense, except not really. Like, there's a lot different here from the Fischer defense to the King's Gambit. Anyways, as white, it's relatively easy to figure out what to do. Basically, we want to play here. We want to move our pawn up, and we want to do this, and we want to reclaim this pawn. So I play d4. We're just going to control the whole center. We've got 2 pieces out. My opponent has a piece out that I'm going to be able to take whenever I want. I'm attacking this pawn. My opponent's probably going to try and castle at some point. So now my opponent moves their bishop back with the understanding that the bishop's just not doing anything here. So if my opponent plays something else, like say bishop g4 or something like that, yeah, I can just regain this pawn. I don't really care if trades are happening here. Like, this is just a totally fine position for me. You can see it's plus 1.5 or so. And it's just because this bishop is so misplaced. Like, it seems like it's doing something over here, but really it's just threatening to get taken. Especially if I can open up the middle of the board, there are going to be tactics there. So my opponent correctly plays bishop e7, and they took another 6 minutes to play this move. They really couldn't exactly figure out what to do here. Again, I just have such a strong center. I'm going to be able to take the pawn back, etc., etc. There are two moves here that the computer likes. The computer likes knight c3, and the computer likes taking this pawn back. And I figure I take this pawn back. Now, let's compare the two sides from this position, right? What does my opponent have? Well, they have d6. They have their bishop developed here. They can probably get their knight out, and they still have the option to castle. I have two really strong central pawns, two already developed bishops, a knight already developed, an open f file to be able to attack down. And the only downside is that my king is unable to castle and is on the f file instead of the e file or somewhere over on the g file, right? So what would you rather take? The computer thinks this is totally equal, 0.000. You can see that over here. But honestly, I'd rather have white. I feel like I'm going to be able to do more with all these pieces in the middle of the board as compared to this and this. I mean, my opponent just has no space here. So my opponent plays knight f6, which is fine enough. And I can't exactly figure out why, but I recognize that my opponent was trying to castle, which they absolutely are trying to do, but I didn't realize that I was just leaving this pawn hanging. Now, interestingly, I think playing knight c3 still leaves some tactics available. But the thing that I was thinking, and I'm trying to remember, again, it's been several months since I played this game, is I wanted to be able to like move stuff up here so I can get my king out and get my rook able to attack along the f-file. So I played h3 to be able to play g4 and then potentially be able to play g5. Now, again, you can see the computer just wants my opponent to take this pawn, and that's absolutely what they should do. You know, I can play knight here to trade. I can play here if I want, I guess. I guess my opponent plays d5. Interesting. Yeah, this check doesn't work because of here. I can go here, I guess. Threaten to trade. But then my opponent just goes back with their knight, and even though I'm threatening here, I can threaten this pawn. Like it's still, my opponent just castles away to safety. I can't take here yet, and if I line up here, my opponent can, I think, get their bishop out by playing here. So this is better for my opponent. They'd be up about a pawn in this position. So they should have taken that pawn. But they were too worried about trying to get their king to safety, and they played castles, which is the second best move. I mean, my opponent's rated 1550 for a reason. So I played knight c3 here, and interestingly, I think even in this position, the best move for my opponent is to take this pawn. And I'll give you a moment if you'd like to figure out what the tactic is here for them to be able to do that. All right, and for those of you who can't see why, you play takes, knight takes, and then you can fork here, right? So my opponent has taken a pawn in exchange for a knight. I'm going to get the pawn back. They're going to get a bishop for the knight, and then I can play something like here. This pawn is still defended. The queen's going to have to move back to somewhere like here. And the question is this 3-on-2 going to be better for my opponent, or is this 4-on-3 going to be better for me? And then my opponent has the two bishops, but I have better development. My king isn't exactly that safe, and I'm going to have to step up if I want to be able to do anything. But I do have stronger control of the center and better development. So the computer thinks that this is about equal, which is interesting. I don't think either of us saw any of that. And instead, my opponent played c6, which I think is the second best move. Yeah, it's the second or third best move. Apparently a6 is slightly tiny little better. So this is the third best move. But again, my opponent's playing well. They're doing fine. They want to be able to contest the center. They probably want to be able to push d5 at some point to be able to sort of close down this bishop. And I, realizing that, well, there are several things that I was thinking here, but the first is that I want to be able to blow up the center a little bit here. If I can force them to play d5 and just have this pawn here, it's going to be hard for them to move around. They're going to have to do a lot of maneuvering with this knight in order to get it to be able to do anything good. I just want to continue to capitalize on my space advantage. So I played e5, and my opponent plays d takes. Now, apparently the best move for me to play here is d takes. Queen takes, rook takes, knight e7, and then yeah, e6, something like this, which is slightly better for me. That might not be the best continuation for my opponents. Yeah. Oh, interestingly, so I should play d takes, and they should just play knight d5 right away because you can't play takes, and I guess I can play bishop takes. And then my opponent's just going to play queen b6 attacking over here. Interesting. And then I think maybe I can play here. Not entirely clear, but either way, apparently the best move for me there is to play d takes, but I did not play d takes. I played knight takes because I didn't want to open this file. I wanted to keep the queens on. I thought, I'm going to come attack my opponent. I've got much better development. I have these bishops over here. There are potentially tactics going on with the fact that I can, at some points, if I can get rid of this pawn, I can put my knight here because this pawn is pinned. So I was like, I don't really want to trade queens. My opponent plays knight b d7. They would love to trade this knight off. And I played g4 because I'm like, look, I'm gonna come get him. Now, if we stop and take a moment here, to play g4 took 6 minutes off my clock, and that was one of the first moves where I took a significant amount of time. I'm down to 30 minutes now out of the 45 minutes, so we still have plenty of time left on our clocks, but every move you kind of take a minute, and this game is going to take a while, I'll tell you. So already we've used a third of our time. We're only on move, 12 of the game, and my opponent is down to 32 minutes. So they also have been taking a fair amount of time in order to get to this point. And my opponent takes here. And I don't want to trade the queens, and I play bishop takes. And my opponent plays bishop d6. They would like to trade this bishop. And if I take this bishop and then my opponent takes with the queen, they're attacking this pawn. I still have to defend. They're also threatening to do some sort of infiltration. I thought, this is not really what I want. And the other thing I thought is I'm not sure I'm going to be able to continue to push these pawns. But if I am, like, for example, if I wanted to at some point play this, which I can't do right now. I mean, that's bad just because my opponent can play knight d5. But if at some point I want to be able to do that, the trouble here is that this can come if my rook ever moves. So the thing that I played here is actually what the computer gives as the best move. And I think that there are some other reasons why this is good that I'm not remembering at the moment. But I played king g2, which I felt good about. And so my opponent is finally able to get a lot of get some trades on the board. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight d7, preventing the queen trade. Now my opponent doesn't want to trade queens, which is fine. And so now I see the opportunity to begin to transform into an endgame, and one that is going to be favorable for me, and that's why playing e6. So first of all, my opponent can't push because then I play here, and I'm winning a queen because of this discover check, right? And my opponent can, in theory, ignore this, but then I think they're losing a rook, right? So let's say they play, knight here or something. I get to play here. My opponent has to play, if they do this, then I'm winning an exchange. Obviously, that's not great. Now their king isn't safe either. Oh, and they're losing a queen. So that's obviously terrible. So they have to go king h8. They're going to have to deal with this at some point, I think. Can they not play here? Oh, they have to play king h8, so it's my move. So takes, and rook he1. Oh, threatening. Right. So then they have to play rook f8. Anyways, basically, there's not a whole lot they can do here other than taking this pawn, which is pretty obvious. Again, if they do anything else, even if they just move their king over. I'm attacking the knight. So they either have to move this knight or they have to take the pawn. So they take the pawn. I take with check, and they move their king over to h8. Obviously, if they play rook takes or whatever, that's going to be terrible for them. So they move their king over. And there are a couple of good moves here. One is knight e4. Just trying to get my knight further centralized, potentially being able to move my knight into d6, to threaten some forks. And the other is what I played, which is rook f1, basically saying, look, you can take if you want, but things are going to be kind of awkward for you here. My opponent doesn't want to trade the rooks, and they play knight f6 directly instead. And so now if we look at, now we're on move 19. And I'm down to 19 minutes and my opponent's down to 20 minutes. And again, the time is going to become a factor in this game. So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, I can play queen takes, I can play rook takes, I can play bishop takes. I can move my bishop back. I can try and move my knight into the middle of the board. Well, that's not going to work. Basically, this bishop is hanging. So I either have to move this bishop or I have to take something, which is going to be forcing. And so, they didn't play. They played knight f6, sorry. They played knight f6, excuse me. So I can either play queen takes or I can play bishop takes. So if I play bishop takes, then they have to take with their rook, right? And then I can potentially trade queens and maybe they end up in a position where their rooks aren't so great. Or I can play queen takes, they move their rook over, and then when I play bishop takes, now they have their two rooks in these places. Now, it turns out that that's better, right? I take here, they take there, I take with this, they take here, and I'm a little bit better here, mostly because this rook is in a dumb spot. So now if I play something like rook d1, gives me a plus 0.2 advantage. That probably would have been better. Instead, what I played is bishop takes. And again, I was starting to feel the fact that there was some time pressure here. And I was also trying to, this was the end of a long day of chess. I was trying to figure out how can I liquidate in a way where I'm not going to throw. I realized that I'm playing a much higher rated player. How How can I like make sure that I end up in a position where I understand what's going on and don't accidentally throw away the game now that I've like worked really hard to get to this position? So my opponent plays rook takes, if I remember correctly. Yeah, rook takes, which is I'm playing rook takes or queen takes is about the same. And then I played queen takes. My opponent plays rook c takes d8, and I play rook 81. I'm like, oh, you want to trade some rooks? So now my opponent, recognizing that we're transforming into an endgame, plays h6, and I think, okay, I'm actually pretty happy to trade rooks here. So I take, they take, and I move my rook here. I'm like, look, yeah, you can do that. That's totally okay. Basically, consider what happens if rooks trade, right? Takes and takes. So my knight is worse, and this is actually what happened in the game. Takes, takes. So now they've got one slightly more advanced pawn here as compared, but my pawns are way more advanced over here. Their knight's slightly closer to the middle of the board, but I'm going to be able to get to the middle of the board relatively easily. My king is much closer to the middle of the board because my opponent has to take 2 moves to start to get out. No matter how they try to move forward, they have to sort of navigate their way around to this pawn or waste a tempo moving it. So I figure if anyone's going to be better in this endgame, it's probably me, which is why I was happy to trade all those rooks. So my opponent plays knight d5, and apparently king f3 is slightly better. And it's slightly better despite the fact that this gives up a pawn here. So basically the threat that my opponent has in this position is knight b4, forking these 2 pawns. And there's no way for me to defend both of them. Basically, I would play something like knight e3. My opponent would take over here. And I would be down a pawn on this side, but getting my king to the center of the board. Instead, I chose to play c3. So now my opponent can't play b4, and my knight is preventing them from moving here, which would have taken this pawn anyways. But now we're totally symmetrical on this side. And my pawns are more advanced. And if I can get my knight into the game, my king will be more advanced and things will be fine. We still have a while to go here, guys, I know. So we're on move 25. I've got 15 minutes left. My opponent has 17 minutes left. And again, long day of chess. So my opponent plays king g8, recognizing that they need to get their king out to the center of the board. I play king f3, and my opponent plays king f7. And I spent a long time trying to figure out what the right thing to do here is. Do I like bump this knight, see it move forward, go here? You know, they potentially attack this pawn, which is currently defended by my knight. Their knight's so much more active than mine. If I can force them to trade to their 1 more active piece, it'll give their king 1 extra tempo, right? So I play here, takes, takes, and their king gets 1 extra tempo, but then it's relatively symmetrical, except I have more advanced pawns on this side of the board. So again, I think if I trade these knights off, I'm probably going to be in a position where either it's a draw or I'm winning. So I chose to play knight e3 after a fairly sizable think here. And my opponent spent a long time thinking here. They spent 4 minutes. So they went from 17 minutes to 13 minutes. And they finally decided to play knight takes e3. I played king takes e3, obviously the only move here. And my opponent plays king e6. And I played king e4, gathering the opposition. Now you'll see the computer thinks this is totally a draw. But now it's a question of like, okay, are there waiting moves that need to happen? And how do we make sure that I don't like end up in zugzwang? Like there's lots of stuff here, right? My opponent can theoretically, if they play something like g5 and close down this side of the board, then we might have been in a position where I'm in zugzwang, right? For example, here, something like this, here, here, here. And this is still equal, but now like I'm the one that's sort of getting chased into the middle of the board here. There's potential for me to mess it up. There's also potential for my opponent to mess it up in that position. So my opponent plays b6, a rather innocuous waiting move, which gives a little bit of life to the position. Now it's plus 0.1, plus 0.2. And I played h4, basically thinking I would like to waste another tempo over here and then have some more tempi, forcing my opponent to move their king or be able to give up some pawns. My opponent played king f6. Apparently the best move for me to play here is king f4. I'm not... What was I calculating here? I think I played c4 because in theory I wanted to be able to potentially... So the thing that I was thinking about is, you know, if I play here and they play this, I play there and they come back here. And then here, 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 here. Somewhere in here something's going on. Oh, a6, right, yeah. So then I'd have to do something like this, this. Yeah, and then we're totally fine. But my opponent doesn't play that. They don't play g5. Because again, the other thing that I was worried about here is takes and king takes, and then we sort of have to like wander around and things are bad there. In fact, I think rather than that move, I have to play something like this, and then again, This does not feel like a great position for me. I feel like I'm on the defensive. My opponent's king is more active. So I play c4. My opponent plays king e6, basically now passing the opposition to me. I play b4. Again, thinking, okay, if I can have all these pawns further up, for example, if I get the opportunity to play a4 at some point, my opponent plays here. The other thing that I know is, so say my opponent plays here. If I can get a4 in and they play a6, I know the way to create a passed pawn on this side of the board. This turns out not to work, but it'll come up later. So my opponent in this position played g5, and this actually is a winning position for me now. I wasn't sure at the time, and when they played g5, they offered a draw, and I said no, and they had about 7 minutes left on their clock, and I played h takes. They played h take. They did not play that. That would have been terrible. They played h takes, and now there's one winning move, and I would highly suggest pausing the video and figuring it out. This is really fascinating. All right, if you paused it and you figured it out, great job. I feel exactly like a Godmador saying that. If not, the winning move here, at first, I thought was a4. And you'll notice the computer does not think that that's what's going on. I saw a6, and then push, and again, something like takes, here, takes, and then this. Now, the trouble here is, like, we're both creating queens here. Like, it's not working for us, right? That's pretty bad. So we can create a passed pawn over there, but not that way. Instead, the winning move here is not a4. It's b5. So let's calculate why. First of all, if my opponent takes, I take, and then if they move their king over, I'm playing here, right? And they can basically create a passed pawn, but it's, to no avail, right? They've got no chance over there, right? Okay, so what else can my opponent do here? Well, they can try and lock it down, and then I play a4. And so now if they play d6, I go here, right? And I'm winning this pawn, obviously, right? So they go here, here, here. Basically they can run over and get this pawn, and I can just run over here and get the base of this pawn chain and be able to promote on this side, right? So we see something like this. And their king's way too far away, obviously. They try and get around, and just there's no hope there. Instead, if we play b5, and again, they take, we take. If they play here, we're going up this direction. If instead they go here, then I'm walking around again. They can't get in here, so they have to do something like this. And even though they'd like to be able to walk around and claim this pawn, they're just obviously far too slow. Like there's no shot here, right? Here, 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 here. Well, even worse because they stepped the wrong place. But even so, we queen first, and then we just have to do the proper technique of checking the king in front. We can even trade queens if we need to, and then queen this pawn. No problem. So b5 was the winning move. However, at this point, I had 8 minutes on my clock. And so I spent a little bit of time thinking, and I played a4. And it was, again, because I know that in the position that my opponent plays a6, I know how to create a passed pawn here. Now, the trouble is, if I see here, takes, and then I play this, I mean, first of all, my opponent has a passed pawn over here. But even if they don't do any of that, my opponent is inside the square. So if they move forward, and then I try and move here, they're just going to come get my pawn. Like, it doesn't work. So while I did play b5, and they did play c takes b5, I played c takes b5, and then my opponent played a5. Now they've frozen, and so now I have to figure out what to do. So I played king d4. They played king d6. I played king e4. And so now they were trying to figure out, do they go back? Do they just keep opposition? They weren't entirely sure, but with 3 minutes on their clock and with 5 minutes on my clock, they decided to go for it. So here. This is the classic, pawn race. Where did I step? I spent a little bit of time here trying to figure out, and I think I played king f5. Yes, I did play king f5. They took this other pawn, so now I'm down a pawn, but I'm queening first, which is great. Here. And so now the difficulty for me was if we trade queens with our kings in this position, I'm not going to be able to take this pawn, right? So let's say I do something like this, step here. I go somewhere like here, they go back, and I try and like check here, takes, and they're in front of the pawn. You know, they're going to be able to box my king out, like no dice, right? Just I'm totally losing. So now the trouble for me is, how do I make sure in this position that I check them in a way that never trades queens? And remember, I've got less than 5 minutes on my clock. They have like 3 minutes on their clock. There's just no, you know, this is a bona fide time scramble. You know, they get down to under 1 minute at some point. So the first thing I do is I play queen d5 check, because they have no way of blocking. My opponent plays king b4. So now I can't check here because the queen's going to take. So I have to find a place where I can check and it'll be fine. So queen e4, totally okay. King c5. I can't check here because then the queen is going to take. So I have to play queen e7 check. And so then my opponent plays king c6. And so then I was worried about what happens if they are able to get behind this pawn. Now, of course, if they're able to get behind that pawn and I have access to the a8 square, then that's going to win me the game. So for example, here. Oh, that doesn't quite work. Here. And then, let's make something up. But basically, if I can get here, then I'm just winning their queen, and then I'm winning. So obviously, they didn't do that. And so with very little time on my clock, it turns out there are several drawing moves here. But I played queen e8 check because, again, I want to play something where my opponent can't get around, or if they do get around, that I know I'm going to be able to have access to that a8 square. And so my opponent plays king c7. I play queen e7 check. My opponent plays king c6, and we're drawing really low on time now. I play queen e8 check again. My opponent plays king c5. I play queen e7 check. And at this point, like, I have to get to the back of my sheet. And I was looking at previous moves. I was down to so little time that I was looking at previous, like, they played king here, and then I played this queen check. So I didn't have to, like, recompute them all the time, because I was like, how can I make sure that we've, like, played the same thing over again? They played king b5. I played queen e2 check. They played king b4. Queen e4 check. They played king c5, and we agreed to a draw in this position. And the computer thinks it's totally a draw. It's going to be, it's absolutely going to be a draw. So let's take a look here at the tail of the tape. If we go to the game review, we can see that I played 89.3 and my opponent played 89.7, both of which are really good. And the game was really even. There were a couple of points, like for example here, when my opponent could have taken that pawn. If we go look here, this is the point where my opponent can take this pawn, where they're slightly ahead. And also, if we look, there are a couple of other positions, like here, for example, where one move earlier there, g4, where instead I should have played something like king g1. But even then, you know, we're what, minus 2. So there were what is the knight b6. Unclear to me why exactly this is so bad for me, but fine. Anyways, my opponent didn't capitalize on any of that. And the game's totally even. And again, when we get to this position, this is the moment where I need to play b5, and the game is, sorry, not b5 here. I need to play takes, which I do. And then I'm supposed to play b5 here, and I'm totally winning. And you can see that this is the last chance that I had according to the computer. And after this, it is a complete draw. But hard to complain so much. I played three great moves. My opponent played 5 great moves. We played a lot of best moves. I played 33 best moves. And I only played 1 blunder. And the 1 blunder I played was a4. And that was, I had 5 minutes or less on my clock. I didn't have any time. I guess I had 8 minutes on my clock. But I just didn't have very much time in order to be able to calculate. And that b5 winning move, there were just too many candidate moves. I didn't have time. Anyways, fascinating game, and I did go and compute what my rating change would be, which turns out to be 100% accurate. So let me send you over to there, where you guys can see how this changed my rating, and then you can see how I was feeling after the game. All right, let's take a look at that rating change. All right, so a little bit of a look here on how my rating changed over the course of the tournament. So I played somebody 761, a 1016. Those were both wins, and then Josh was 1447. I lost there, and then I tied a 1545. So I scored 2.5 out of 4. My performance rating of 1366, which is pretty good. Again, we play those higher rated people. We have a chance to gain a lot of rating. And my new rating was 1161. You can see, though, if I just score an extra half point somewhere in there, then my rating jumps all the way up to 1210, so I can get 100 rating points. And if somehow I went 4 out of 4, you can see I jump all the way up to 1307. So if I can play some of these high rated opponents and get some draws or some wins, I really have some opportunities here. Anyways, if we look back, still not too much to complain about. Again, a 1366 tournament performance, score an 1161, and this game where we beat this 1016 was actually fairly lucky for us. So not too much that we can complain about.
Okay, guys, round 4 in the books. So I was playing Cheyenne, who I've played before. If I can remember, I'll link to the game where I played him before. But this time I got white, which was nice. He plays really boring, e4, e5, like Italian positions. I played f4, and he went, and we got into an interesting middle game, and I was trying to decide when to turn it into an end game, and I got to the point where I was unsure of whether or not I actually had an advantage. Like, I had more space, but his king had more safety, and I was like, my pawns are pushed further. If I can get my king active, that's probably a winning endgame for me. So I did a bunch of trading, and I eventually got all the queens and rooks off the board, and I even managed to trade our knights, which I'm sure you guys saw in the analysis. And then it's a king and pawn endgame, and it might be winning for white. It's not entirely clear. There are a couple times where I think I could have wasted some more tempi and perhaps forced his king to move, but I wanted to get the right position on the queen side of the board. And I really hope that I showed you guys on the queen side of the board that 3 versus 3, I can like automatically generate a passed pawn. That's not a problem. But the problem is generating a passed pawn loses for me because his king is in the square. So then I just lose. So that felt good, but it was one of those, the kings are a little bit too close for me to be able to play the right thing here. And I can't let him play that. So I played that, but then I did the thing that forces us into a position where we basically both sides are sort of locking each other out. He ended up sort of running his king around, and he got all the way down to 7 seconds on the clock while I was perpetual checking him. I kind of was just hoping that his clock was going to run out, and I was trying to keep track of whether or not it was a threefold repetition because I also didn't want to get into a position where I could let him trade queens, but I just kept checking him on the e-file, which ended up working. And as long as I was careful, it was fine. It was also cool because I could look back at previous moves in my own game to figure out which checks were appropriate. Which is like a neat little trick when you're in time travel. You're like, I played this and he didn't do anything bad, and I had more time to figure it out, so I'll just play this again. It works out. So that was good. So 2.5 out of 4 on the day. I'm sure I already told you what the rating gain or loss is, but I think that it's going to be a pretty good day for me, all in all. So I'm feeling pretty good about that, and I think I do need to be playing up in some more of these sections. I got some YouTube comments on the one that I posted today saying, hey, I've said it once before, I've said it again, you need to play up, and if you're going to get better. And that's true. But I still obviously have some tactical weaknesses in my loss today. Like, I was doing totally fine, and then I just totally blundered in exchange because I didn't see all the way through. I still don't quite have the tactical vision, but it'll come with time. It takes practice. I'm pleased with the progress I've been making. I still have not gotten the opportunity to play my Smith Mora. I'm booking up and booking up and booking up, and nobody plays the Sicilian. But I'm excited for when that'll come. I need to study my King's Gambit a little bit more, and I need to come up with some better solutions as black. I think I might want to try and learn the Dutch. It's really hard, but it's one of those, like, I don't know, it'll be hard for both of us. So I think I might just, like, become a player that has an aggressive repertoire against most things. Although the Nimzo is good against the QGD, so I'll have to see if there's a way that I can transpose so that the London I can play the Dutch, and then the QGD I can play the Nimzo Indian. Anyways, we'll figure that out later. As always, I stream chess on Tuesday nights on Twitch. Come hang out. It's a lot of fun. We actually get a pretty decent crew. You can always get a game in. As well as you can just hang out and tell me about how your tournament's been going. I've been loving hearing how you guys are doing in the comments. I think I'm up to 3 or 4 or 5 different people now have told me that they went and started playing over the board chess because they saw some of the videos that I have. I encourage you all, if you have the time and the means, you should absolutely go out and play over the board. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty stressful, but it gets easier over time. The win is just showing up and getting used to it. Your rating doesn't matter until you've played like a bunch. If you played for years and years and years, then your rating means something. If you're learning, it's like, your rating just indicates that you have some more to learn and to practice. All right, that's all I got. Love you guys. See you in the next tournament.